Hello! One day at the office, when I still had a job, I overheard a colleague talking about that sunken boat in the estuary. This pricked my ears up. I was told about this boat back when I was little and was interested to hear other people's opinions on it. It turned out they were mistaken, so I piped up. What they were talking about wasn't a sunken boat, it was a broken floating dock left over from World War II. The actual sunken ship was further out into the estuary, and I described it as the one that might kill us all at any moment. This upset my colleagues, and it was then I realised they had no clue about the monster in our midst. In World War II, the Thames estuary was used as a staging ground for the Normandy landings, or D-Day as it's known. Amongst the many vessels prepping for the launch were floating docks, slabs of hollow concrete that would be used as temporary mooring points for the invading fleet once the Normandy beaches were taken. I say temporary, they're still there. You can go see them the next time you're in France. But one of these docks never made it that far. In fact, it only got a few hundred feet before bottoming out on the sandbank, snapping in half and sinking. It's still there to this day, and as my former co-worker proved, it is often mistaken for a boat. But the floating dock wasn't the only victim of the sandbanks. The SS Richard Montgomery was a warship that was supposed to take part in D-Day. But in 1944, like the floating dock, it too bottomed out on a sandbank, snapped in half, and sank. To this day, only its 3 masts are visible above the water. Now, the big difference between the two is that the dock was hollow and is nothing but an eyesore and minor inconvenience to sailors. The Montgomery, however, is bloody terrifying. When it sank, the Montgomery had an estimated 1.5 kilotons of explosives on board, and as far as anyone knows, it's all still there. If the Montgomery were to explode, it is estimated it would cause a 3-kilometre or nearly 2-mile high plume of water, and a tidal wave estimated between 1 metre high, or carrying people off height, and 5 metres high, or ignoring sea defences and smashing buildings height. A mere 2 kilometres away is a town with a population of 20,000, which could be washed away and or blown away. 4 kilometres away is a gas and oil refinery and power plant, which could be hit by debris and blown up, or flooded, causing a fire, then blown up. On top of this, the tidal wave would rush down the Thames towards London, potentially maintaining power and height as the decreasing shockwave was funneled into a tighter and tighter space, causing flooding and destruction all the way into the capital. Simply put, the Montgomery going off would result in what would theoretically be one of the biggest single non-nuclear explosions since World War II, and cause vast swathes of damage. When telling my co-workers these little tidbits of information, one of them asked if we would get a warning if the Montgomery were to go off. Would we get time to run for cover? I told them the first warning we'd get would be a massive boom, followed by all the windows in the office breaking, possibly random debris smashing through the walls at high speed, and then we'd have a few moments before the tidal wave hit. To say the least, if the Montgomery went off, we wouldn't stand a chance. Having had their worldviews significantly altered, someone asked how likely this was to happen. Now that's an interesting question. The SS Richard Montgomery is, essentially, Schrodinger's dragon. You don't know if it's dead or asleep until you pull on its tail. When it sank, the Montgomery did initially have a salvage operation underway on it, until it sank. Then it was simply left to be dealt with by someone at some point. Year on year, decade on decade, the responsibility of whose job it is to deal with the Montgomery was passed around from one government department to another. Because of this, no one did anything about removing the wreck or the explosives therein. Well, that's as far as we know anyway. At one point, all information about the Montgomery was meant to be kept under the Official Secrets Act, but it's hard to keep that information secret when the thing itself is right on people's doorsteps. Because of this, some information was released to the public, but there is still plenty that is being kept under wraps about exactly what is known about the wreck, and what possible actions can be done about it. Ideas that have been floated include carefully removing each bomb by hand, building a dam around the wreck, and even building a tomb, Chernobyl style. The fact that the Montgomery, despite being in one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world, hasn't been touched except by idiots, says a lot about the risks involved. It all comes down to deterioration. The wreck of the Montgomery has been surveyed by divers, sonar and ultrasonic scans. Even so, the exact condition of the ship can't be confirmed beyond deteriorating but stable. Potentially, the ship and all its contents has degraded so much that the explosives are no longer a threat. Or there might still be functional blasting caps or fuses or what have you in there somewhere. The sweet spot, or not so sweet spot, is the Montgomery is stable enough for at least one fuse or cap or whatever to still be intact, but unstable enough that the slightest movement could set it all off. That is why no one is willing to go near it. That is why no one is willing to pull on the dragon's tail. And yet, we might not need to do anything anyway. The very motion of the ocean and the shifting of the sands could one day settle the matter for us. This is not a fanciful tale, nor a science fiction yarn, not even a story from history. This is the story of the dragon laying in the river near where I live, either sleeping soundly, waiting to awake explosively, or dead and forever still. The fact so few people seem to know that this is a thing, including people who live near it, is shocking to me. It makes me wonder about all those conspiracy theories I've heard that have made me think, nah, that wouldn't happen. The depths of human ignorance are apparently bottomless. If you've enjoyed this story, let me know. Tell us if you've heard about the SS Richard Montgomery, or if you have a similar tale to tell. As always, feel free to subscribe, and links to my Patreon and Etsy store will be in the description. Last but not least, thank you for watching.